Hi, my name is Deon Rebello from DCX Bullion, and I've got Willem Theron with me today. And this is our third installment of the Bullion Vault, which is going to be our weekly podcast and discussing various topics pertaining to precious metals, but not only precious metals. Of course, there's a lot of different factors that play into the pricing on precious metals. And today, specifically, we're actually going to talk about gold and where we are. It's 2025, January the 15th. And what in the crystal ball of bullion is gold now, and where will it be by the end of this year? Now, of course, crystal balls and predictions are generally, in my mind, and forgive me for the terminology, a thumbsuck, but a lot of the times they are. And again, we'll unpack what we saw in 2024 and kind of where literally some of the highest paid analysts couldn't even get it correct as far as the pricing and where it would go, because there's different factors. There's geopolitical, there's political within different countries, there's currencies, there's economies that all have a big piece to play in this. And right now, I mean, Willem, this is where we are. It's
Yeah, I mean, let's start with 2024. It was an absolute monstrous year for gold. I mean, we saw 14 new all-time highs in just last year. We hit the all-time high of $2,790 per ounce, which was absolutely crazy. It was gold's best performance in 14 years. It rose by 25.5%. I mean, it's absolutely insane. And as you said, it's mostly due to geopolitical tensions, strong investor and central bank demands, and it actually outperformed all major asset classes in 2024. And that's including stocks, bonds, cash, commodities. It was insane. And as you said, I mean, yeah, I don't think a lot of the analysts could have predicted that.
Yeah, and I think there's a very important part here is we living in extraordinary times. We look at the world of 2024. We still got the whole Ukraine Russia thing going on. We got the whole BRICS component in world politics versus the West and East and so on. And a lot of those, regardless of which side you're on or what you support or don't support, have major parts to play within how the performance of gold. Let's just look at, as you mentioned, gold hit unprecedented levels in 2024. But what, like specifically in your mind, were some of the things that really tipped it and pushed it that much higher?
Um, I think, well, obviously, as we said, geopolitical tension is a strong one. We saw the war in Russia, Ukraine. That I mean, that's still ongoing now. I think it's coming up on 3 years now. Then we had the Gaza Israel war that broke out, and all of this is just fueling tension. It's fueling panic among buyers, and that is one of the things that gold is known for. It's a safe haven investment. So whenever you get these kind of troubles, people rush to gold. Along with that, we also had China extend its gold buying streak. I mean, they had a pause for a few months, and then last year they once again got into it, and the central bank actually bought. I can't remember the exact figure, but it was a lot of. I think it was something like 103. I stand under major correction there, but I think it was something like 103 million ounces of gold that the central bank in China bought. So that's another thing. And as I said, central bank, investor, and geopolitical tension are three of the major drivers of that gold price.
And let's also be clear here. I think from a central bank perspective, yes, China was definitely the leader in buying, but across Europe, a number of the countries there, into the east, across the world, it's a way that a country, in short, negates the uncertainty that is positioned in the world right now with all this uncertainty.
Yeah, and it's the one thing we always tell people. It's physical, it's tangible. You can touch it, you can put it away somewhere. You can. It's not up in a cloud somewhere. It's not on a piece of paper somewhere that if that paper gets destroyed or that cloud goes down, it's worthless. It's something physical that you can hold in your hand. It's there, and that's why they are buying and they are looking at that as an asset.
So just with regards to that, and we always talk about this, and I always smile when you get, gold's considered an alternate investment to the mainstream. And again, my whole point is if we look at mainstream economics and that position, central banks are the foundation of that, and they are procuring and buying gold on a monthly basis all around the world, ounces or kilograms of gold, and they're buying in the physical form. Yet, yes, you get the paper derivatives and so on, but at the end of the day, and this is what we've always spoken about, is the tangible asset is firstly geo-neutral. That means I can take an ounce of gold, go anywhere in the world, and regardless of the currency, I will get a similar pricing anywhere in the world. And the great thing with that is it shows real value. We look at also other things, other stocks, the performance of currencies, and everything, even over the last 50 years, the value of what $10 would have bought you 50 years ago, what it buys you today, has diminished. We talk about the Rand where we live, what the Rand would buy you, crazy enough, even last year to what you're buying now. Things are just shooting up. The actual value is lost. And yet, on the other side, an ounce of gold is a fixed weight of a measurement for gold. And yet, that ounce over the last 50 years has gone from around $40 an ounce to, as you've spoken, to over $2,600 an ounce.
Yeah, and I think the major thing here is, I mean, we've done the studies where we compared the value of gold to the value of an investment in cash or something like that, and we've now done it in three currencies, I think, and in every single one of them, gold wins. And usually it's not by a small margin, it is by an absolute massive margin. We've done another study where we took a retirement annuity, we compared the value of that to the value of gold, should you have made a similar investment in gold, and gold wins hands down. And that's why, people see it as a safe haven investment. That's why people do see it as a long-term investment to negate wealth, the currency depreciation and inflation.
Yeah, and I think what you also mentioning there is quite important, that where things stand, and this is where the physical commodity has a value. And again, where you also spoke, which was very important, based on all these case studies that we've done, it's not about buying today, selling tomorrow. I mean, the world lives on instant gratification, and we saying, hold on, it can't be that way. This is about accumulation. This is about generational wealth. This is about growing and maintaining a value of your wealth over periods of time instead of to buying today and selling tomorrow. And that's also a very important aspect of it.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I was speaking to a friend a few weeks ago during December, and we were just talking about investments and gold, and you could immediately see that mindset coming through of, yes, but how much would I have made if I bought it 5 months ago and sold it now? And yeah, that's the most important thing we're trying to get through to the general public, is that's not what gold is. That's not what precious metals are about. I mean, if you go and look at 20-year performance of gold now, 20 years ago, you might think, oh, gee, that's a lifetime ago. Monsters Inc. came out 21 years ago. It doesn't feel that long now, does it?
No.
And that's the thing. And I think people underestimate how quickly time goes by and the significant impact that time has on an investment in bullion. I mean, in gold, in rand terms, I think it was a growth of over 1,000% over the last 20 years. And I mean, it's insane to think about it like that.
Yeah, and I think also, and this is a very important aspect of it, is we are going into a new year. there are expectations, and across the board, what is quite interesting is already your different investment companies, the investment banks, and so on are all making their predictions from the likes of Goldman Sachs all the way through to JP Morgan's, and even all the major banks around the world. They all give a stab at it and say, this is what the price is. We discussed this in the last installment where, the outlook for 2024 was very conservative. And in fact, a lot of the more established investment companies were quite conservative in their outlook. We kind of went middle of the road, and again, it was around $2,250 an ounce. It exceeded that, and I think it exceeded everyone's expectations.
Yeah, I was looking at some of the predictions from last year. Looking back on it now, it's actually quite funny. The $2,700 that we were looking at and thought that might be a bit optimistic, and it passed that. So yeah, at the moment we're looking, commodity prices were kind of sluggish, and the outlook is they're going to remain sluggish. There's a not a great global economic outlook, and the dollar is resurgent once again. We'll see what happens there, because what's going to happen in America is going to have a massive impact on literally everything. I mean, oil prices in 2024 were down due to weak Chinese demand, and it looks to remain sluggish for 25. And then, you were talking about JP Morgan. They actually put gold at $3,000 an ounce this year.
Yeah.
And now, sorry.
No.
And but the one thing we need to see is gold break that $2,800 psychological barrier. Because if you look at last year, it got stuck on 2,790.
Yes.
It's that 2,800 barrier that it needs to break. And I think once it does that, I don't see why it can't go to 3,000. It can't go to 3,200 maybe. Looking at some of the other predictions, we've got I looked at a few of them, and the most pessimistic one I saw was 2,600.
Yes, it's interesting how the world has changed over such a short period of time, where before and as we said, come early 2024, the gold was already on around $2,000, and even then people were saying no, it won't break to 1,900. And again, there were also other predictions that by 2030, which is the end of this decade, we will be sitting on where we exceeded. Interesting enough, I think for me, and based on the research that I've done and looked into the various different market analysts and all the different companies that are putting their pegs down for 2024, 2025. I think realistically, we're looking at definitely breaking that 2,800. I do foresee that we will keep a lot of lateral movements into the first part of this year, first quarter, and into the second quarter. Of course, we then go into the Northern Hemisphere summer. So I think towards probably July, August, we may get that first peak and break of 2,800. There are a couple of factors, and we're going to go into those. But again, it should retract, and I do believe towards October, November, we'll get that kind of leveling out, and then another surge towards Christmas and the festive season and the end of the year. There are a couple of things that play to and against the performance of gold. Right now, there's a lot stacked in gold's favor, and we look at global economies, so all the countries themselves, and they're not in great shape right now. We're talking China, the countries within the European Economic Community, the US, all of those, they are not in great position economically. What's your thoughts there?
Economically they aren't in great shape. I mean, it looks like they're doing great, but underneath, there's a lot of the economies that were artificially inflated.
And again, I think what's important there, Willem, is where did that come from? Where did we start to see that?
Well, this is the thing. If you don't have a currency backed buy a physical commodity like gold, like silver, or whatever you want to call it, then I mean it's easy to just print money.
Yeah.
But the more you print, the less and less that becomes worth. I mean, we saw that our dear neighbor Zimbabwe, where it reached a point where they were paying $300 trillion for a loaf of bread. And that's the danger of printing yourself out of it without having any physical, tangible commodity backing the value of that dollar. America printed more dollars in, I think it was 2020, than the rest of the history combined.
Yeah.
And that's the problem. And now you can see the greatest economy in the world is still struggling with that.
So you highlight something very important. So they of course highlighted the whole COVID pandemic or epidemic or however you want to paint it. And again, we always take a neutral position. We're not here to say we for or against it. This is about the outcome of those events. And the important thing is you talk about overvalued markets. We look at the tech stocks within the US, they're severely overvalued. And a lot of that came through during the pandemic, where, of course, companies, we were all in lockdown, we were all online, we were all doing this as a living and living from home. I mean, all the videos and everyone experiencing this for the first time, being in these positions, changed the world fundamentally. But economy still needed to run and still needed to perform. And this is where you talk about monetary policy, and this is where the Fed and all the other reserve banks of every country had to make sure that their countries didn't actually collapse, the economies didn't collapse. And hence they then did a lot of quantitative easing, which was, as you mentioned, producing currency into the market to support that market from collapse. You mentioned the US dollar, and that it was actually, I think it was 2021, and literally they produced 20% of all the dollars ever produced were produced in 1 year, which was, it's insane, and still to believe that that was done then. The important thing there is also, we are touching on the American market or economy, is there's another big factor there. And it is, of course, our good old friend Donald Trump. And he, we discussed this in the last installment also, where he is now officially the president of the US. He will be taking office in the next couple of weeks. And then we got a Trump administration. That doesn't necessarily change monetary policy within the US, because of course that is governed from their reserve bank, which is a non-political institution and does not sway to either Republican or Democrat decisions based on that. However, there are some other factors. Foreign policy is a very big thing. We look within Africa, we know that Trump is not crazy about the AGOA agreement being renewed, which is actually coming up for renewal soon. That will affect a lot of African economies, which South Africa is one of them, which will have a direct effect on what is either decided to be extended or reduced. We look at foreign policy with regards to war, or the approach to war. We see, you mentioned initially the whole Russia-Ukraine. North Korea is now getting themselves involved in that bun fight, for a lack of a better word.
Yeah, definitely. But now you spoke about Trump coming in, and he's promised some hefty tariffs on everything, and this gives us a chance to look into the silver market. Now, as we know, silver usually follows the trend of gold, and eventually, most of the time, outperforms gold. And so silver has been also been doing quite well over the past year, and the price is set to be likely to increase for this year as well. Because if we look at it, we have to remember, I mean, it's not as expensive as gold, but we have to remember that silver is a rare metal.
Yes.
Supply is limited, and industrial demand for silver is going through the roof. As you know, silver is the most useful commodity after oil, I think.
Yes.
In the world, we use it in literally anything you can think of. PV cells, for solar panel, automotive sector is using a lot more silver with the electric vehicles that are now being produced. Electronics, all of it depends on silver. However, the price of silver is tied to demand. And with the tariffs being introduced, we don't know what the demand is going to look like, you know.
So what's interesting there, and again, 2024 is quite an interesting year for silver. The years prior, silver would have a big breakout and it would peak, and then there'd be quite a sharp pullback. And we can talk in dollar terms per ounce. It broke the $20, it shot up to high 29 20s into the early 30s, and then quick retractions. And in prior to 2024, the difference in 2024 was it built slowly up and it went into the mid 20s and held ground where it would, those quick retractions were not actually seen in 2024. Um, Silver's looking more stable. I always used to compare gold and silver in the analogy is gold is like a marathon runner. It's long and slow and it will get the job done. And silver I always used to compare to as a child on Ritalin or without Ritalin, in fact, where it's up and down, it's all over the place. It goes forward and then it comes back, and yet we saw the silver market in one aspect was more mature in its responses to the external factors that affect its pricing. So for me, it's very exciting. I think if you look at the gold silver ratio, there's still a lot to go there. And anyone that's interested in that, and will do a whole installment on gold silver ratio because they talk to each other. Willem spoke about it earlier. Whereas traditionally, if you go back throughout even the last 50 years, there is a pattern, and even further back, where traditionally gold tends to surge and silver is very slow on the uptake. But in actual percentage of the price of silver, silver has always outperformed gold in the long run. And we're seeing that. We know that there are a lot of analysts talking about silver finally breaking the $50 mark and then going into three figures. I still think that we're going to have a major build where we're sitting around $30 an ounce. I see it going consolidating into the mid 30s. And again, towards July, August this year, we could see it starting to push into the high 30s and possibly dipping into that $40 mark and then a retraction. But as I said, previous years there were quick retractions and then the prices bottomed out and stayed low. That was the difference of 2024.
And I think one other factor that is playing in silver's favor right now is silver is crucial to the production of AI products.
Yeah.
And I mean, we just looked at where AI has gone in the past 2 years. The uptake has been insane. The research, the drive for AI has been absolutely crazy. I mean, we've got AI phones, we've got literally anything. We've got AI fridges, and silver is crucial to all of those products, which means with a strong market like AI to drive it, we're also likely to see more support for the price of silver.
Again, absolutely. And again, we look at the photovoltaic market, the solar panel market, that has been growing at 20% per annum. Uh, Also, this is also needs to be considered, is that over the last 3 years, silver has run at a deficit on supply for each year. And that does speak of an increase in the actual pricing. Basic economics, supply and demand. If the supply outstrips the demand, or if the demand outstrips the supply, you will have an increase in price.
Yeah, and then right there we get back to it is a rare commodity. It is a rare metal. And if you think about everything that silver is being used in, I think maybe that's something we tend to forget.
Yeah, and I think if we also consider that silver is where it is in relation to gold, there is a lot of growth. As we mentioned, the gold silver ratio. And this is also where I do believe that from a value perspective, if people are saying gold is a bit expensive for me, there's a lot of value still in silver, even at the current pricings. Do expect pullbacks. It's part and parcel of anything you buy. Any commodity on earth sits in a marketplace where it's upping, it's growing, increasing, or decreasing in its value. Again, it's how it maintains that growth over the period. And I think silver absolutely interesting on and then if we talk about other commodities, platinum had a very it was the poster boy of commodities in 2023. It had the greatest growth within the commodity market. Yet 2024 was not kind to platinum. We look, South Africa being a very mining focused country, especially also having highest platinum reserves in the world, and then also Russia having the highest palladium reserves in the world. From a production perspective, there was definitely a drop. Ours being more labor related and labor to pricing related. So in order to pull the material out of the ground, it costs money, and that line was not really coming to an edge. I think there was the labor market was a little inflated versus the actual mining of the product.
Yeah, and I think another factor that we need to look at here is the uptake of electric vehicles.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, I believe we were all surprised by how quickly that has grown in the past few years. And that does have a significant impact on the palladium and platinum market because, as you know, platinum and palladium are key ingredients in the autocatalytic converters.
Yeah.
And with the uptake of more electric vehicles, that demand shrinks. And unless we once again turn over to the hydrogen fuel cells, you know, platinum is getting a little bit less in demand in that sector. So maybe if there's an uptake on hydrogen, we might see a surge in the platinum again because it's used as a conductor in the hydrogen cells. And to this date, they've done many experiments but haven't found anything that works quite as well. So that's why, even if it is expensive, they're still using platinum.
I will say this, that I do believe that hydrogen technology has been a bit on the back burner. Elon Musk with Tesla made electric cars very sexy, and as you've said, the response from the rest of the automotive industry has been overwhelming. You look 3 years ago to get an electric car was something, whereas it's very become the standard and norm. Even within our country, where maybe it was we, as far as infrastructure, is not fully developed as a first world economy. However, people are buying electric cars. We're seeing electric docking bays throughout the cities, been becoming more and more prominent. But I do believe that hydrogen, as far as a fuel cell, offers better options than a battery, as far as the technology, the longevity, the power to weight ratio, and so on.
Yeah, definitely. It is a much superior technology in my mind as well. However, the issue is logistics on the hydrogen gas or liquid itself. Infrastructure you mentioned, we're struggling with providing for electric vehicles. Can you imagine if you had a hydrogen vehicle in this country? I think there's one garage where you can go and get your hydrogen filled in many kilometers. So it's an infrastructure problem as well.
Again, I think if we're talking trend wise here, I think it's a global thing, and once it starts to take shape and take root and it starts to spread across the world, that infrastructure, as you say, needs to then be implemented. I do believe that platinum has got a very good look, a good outlook for 2025, and I do believe that it's going to be driven mainly, funny enough, by hydrogen. We know that originally that Japan declared themselves to be the first hydrogen economy a couple of years ago, and that is quite an important aspect of it because it's just not just automotives, it's ships, it's houses, it's a whole lot of infrastructure that we cover that. Again, how do we get it to those energy source? Well, how do we take that energy source to the different vehicles or mechanisms? That will be part of the challenge. But I do believe that platinum definitely in the outlook for 2025 will build on a very lateral, poor, low performance year of 2024.
Yeah, I think platinum still has a long way to go, but you might just have to be patient.
Again, and this is another thing we talk about, that it's not about buying today and having the value tomorrow. Yes, gold had an unbelievable year last year, where I think it had an overall of about 25% growth throughout the year. That is a once-off event. It could happen again this year if there is further geopolitical uncertainty that comes into play. But as it stands, gold will continue to grow, and I think that's very important.
Definitely, and yeah, as I said, platinum it still has some legs to go. We're just going to have to be patient on it. Silver, I think, is going to have also has a lot of growth ahead of it, especially with the uses in all sorts of technology, in electronics, in AI, literally everything we've spoken about. And then gold, maybe not as great as 2024 was, but yes, there is still a bullish outlook on gold.
Okay, so 2025, Willem's got his crystal ball in front of him, and we get asked this all the time. You know it, because people are lovely clients who we do sincerely appreciate. Come to us for advice. Of course, we spend a lot of time doing research, making sure that what information we give is the latest, best information, and more importantly, is as accurate as we can make it. We do rely on a lot of external factors that could literally change overnight. Like if China had to invade Taiwan tomorrow, that would send the markets completely running. Gold would shoot to $5,000 overnight. I don't believe that would be the case. But if we talk about a real where the world is right now, so we know the different hotspots politically or geopolitically right now with the different conflicts going on. We know that economically, the European Union, China, across the East, even into India and into the US, that economically the economies aren't performing well. There's a definite bubble, for lack of a better word, within the US economy. We've spoken about this since 2019, where there is a big expectation of some market correction slash depression or recession in place within the US. That again could send gold literally through to $5,000 an ounce. But my question is, you got your crystal ball, you seeing where gold is, you see where silver is, and you see where platinum is. What's your thoughts? Where do you see it going?
Well, as you mentioned, I mean, the World Gold Council predicted gold to reach 1,600 last year. So just putting it out there, um, I think depending on what happens in a geopolitical sense, I don't think $3,000 an ounce is out of the question. I think we might see that in 2025. I don't think it's going to climb much higher than that, but I do think we might see gold breach that $3,000.
Okay, so that's gold. Silver.
I really haven't looked all that much into the silver yet. I'm thinking, well, I'll have to do a little bit more research on it. But as I said, it is a positive outlook for silver.
Okay.
I don't think it's going to go up in leaps and bounds, but it will definitely remain quite stable throughout the year, growing incrementally.
And I think that's very important. As I painted the picture of silver on previous years, where it was more erratic on its pricing, I think what you really highlighting is the stability and the growth. It may be incremental, but I do believe you 100% spot on there. Okay, and then platinum. We're looking at right now about $950 an ounce.
Yeah, I think I don't see platinum going up all that much in 2025. As we said, We've got the EV sector, which is climbing, and that's using a lot of silver. Yes, it does use platinum as well, but not as much as the AutoCAD sector does. And I don't see platinum climbing too much. Yeah, it's definitely not going to have the performance it had in 2023. I sort of see it more lateral this year. But yeah, once again, we'll have to wait and see.
Okay, so for me, I see gold definitely breaking, as I'd said earlier, the $3,000, well, firstly the 2,800, and I do see it consolidating and heading towards and probably holding. I'm going to be conservative here, just under 3,000 by the end of the year. I still think that would be phenomenal growth from where it is now. That's based on if things remain currently the same, if that is possible. But we know that things can upturn and things can be completely upended within a matter of 24 hours. We see the fires within LA and all of that happening in California right now, and that literally can change things very rapidly. So gold, I'm saying around 3,000. I do think it might even break 3,000 and be quite bullish in that whole July August period. But then I see some pullbacks and then that stability growth growing towards the end of the year. Silver, I've personally always been a very big fan of silver, based on its availability as far as the pricing thing. Again, an ounce of gold, same weight, is $2,600 an ounce. An ounce of silver right now, same weight, is around $30 an ounce. You can't compare that as far as purchasing power for the man in the street. So for me, I do believe, as you've said, and we've definitely painted the picture for silver, that it's that consolidation of building on from where it's gone, being less erratic and more being stable on its price. However, I do see silver heading into the high 30s and possibly going into the 40s. If there is any consolidation, I do foresee that we'll finish on a very high silver price, probably around 38 to about $39 an ounce for the year. Platinum, again, we've painted the picture there that for its growth, there needs to be a lot of market infrastructural developments to really start to spur it on. But I do see that the uptake of hydrogen is going to become more and more demanded, and that in turn will start to push the platinum price. I do see platinum getting back to about $1,200 an ounce, which would be very good for it where it is right now. But then again, as you say, it's a wait and see.
No, definitely, and yeah, I think silver I would be a little bit more conservative, but but yes, I understand where you're coming from. But yeah, so I think that pretty much sums up what we've got to go on right now. And further, we'll see where it takes us.
Thanks, Willem. And I think, just to wrap up everything, from a viewer perspective, we always open to people raising questions. If they're not certain on something, they want maybe more clarity on something, we're more than happy to look into it. We've got a lot of content that we're going to be discussing over the next couple of months. Some very interesting things that we are going to go into. And please don't hesitate, like the postings, like them, subscribe, and be part of our journey.